So now in regards to the Marvels, we don't get Doom Part 2, but we do get the Marvels, who now has Doom Part 2's IMAX spot for a week. A little bitter about that. I'm a little salty about that. But yeah, so now the Marvels is coming out, and it has reportedly been plagued with lengthy reshoots and now appears likely to underwhelm at the box office. That news has been coming out. It's really going to underperform, and they have a budget about like $250 million. It's insane. Some of these films just have these huge budgets. And I just want to point out that Dune Part 1 had a budget of around $165 million. Now, obviously, that's just the production side, and there's marketing in addition to that. But as far as the production, $165 million, and Dune Part 2 is reportedly around $120 million. And you have the Marvels with this budget, this bloated budget of $250 million. And when you see it, when you see previews, it's like, where is this money going? And what it is it's because of this production chaos. So they've had multiple reshoots because they don't know what they're doing. They don't have a plan. They're just making it up as they go. See, before they had a plan, they knew how everything was going to connect, and they had a singular vision when it came to building up anticipation for Thanos and building upon the dynamic of the Avengers themselves. And they built upon that, and they had that singular vision. But now it's just like a free-for-all. Nothing really seems to connect. They say they connect, but they don't really. See, Loki season 1, basically, all of time was done away with. The sacred timeline was done away with. Now there was multiple timelines, like infinite amount of timelines or whatever. But what was the consequences of that? Because we didn't see any consequences in any other following production. Doctor Strange 2, yeah, it was about a multiverse, but it didn't seem to connect from the events of Loki. It was just its own thing. And now, I have this feeling that people are just tired of multiverse stuff because it just seems like an excuse for lazy writing. That they just want to use multiverses as an excuse for cameos. And DCU has been doing this as well, on its way out as well. The writer of this article makes some assumptions. They say that they made $30 billion over 32 films in regards to the Infinity Saga and a few post-Infinity Saga films. That's impressive. And so they say that replicating that kind of phenomenon is never easy. I don't think it could ever be done again, but that's just me. The writer assumes that the source of Marvel's current troubles can be traced back to 2020. That's when the COVID pandemic ushered in a mandate to help boost Disney's stock price with an endless torrent of interconnected Marvel content for the studio's fledgling streaming platform Disney+. According to the plan, there would never be a lapse in superhero fare, with either a film in theaters or a new television series streaming at any given moment. So I disagree with what the current troubles started. Like I said before, I think the current trouble started in Ant-Man and the Wasp. It was not a good decision to insert these two films that really didn't add anything to the saga as a whole post-Infinity War. They could easily have been taken out. But it was very much shoehorned into it, and I think ultimately detracts from the saga as a whole. And most people, I think, would just skip those two films and go straight from Infinity War to Endgame anyways upon rewatching. They're assuming that this is just solely on the fact that this is just streaming content and, endless torrent of streaming content. But that's not the problem. The problem is bad stories. An endless torrent of bad stories. And you had people that were initially that watched this stuff, that were excited for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that were excited for WandaVision. It was intriguing, I guess, at least. And you had that built-in fan base of those who would check it out. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of shows, but there were a lot of bad shows. And that's the ultimate problem. And the writer continues that the ensuing tsunami of spandex proved to be too much of a good thing, and the demands of churning out so much programming taxed the Marvel apparatus. Again, it's just too much of a bad thing, to be honest. This was a quote from Wall Street analyst Eric Handler, who covers Disney. The Marvel machine was pumping out a lot of content. Did it get to the point where there was just too much and they were burning people out on superheroes? It's possible. The more you do, the tougher it is to maintain quality. They tried experimenting with breaking in some new characters like Shang-Chi and Eternals with mixed results. With budgets as big as these, you need home runs. I don't know, what do you guys think? Was it just the mere fact that it was just too much? Because as I was saying before, that they had like 30 films and 1 to 2 films were coming out every year. People didn't have a problem with superhero fatigue that they like to make excuses for. It's just bad stories. So this is going into the Marvel's troubles. So the movie cost $250 million and is tracking to open at $75 million to $80 million. I honestly don't know if it will get that much. I think they might be overestimating, maybe a little bit. Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, in its debut weekend, made $185 million. Directed by Nia DaCosta, The Marvels unites Larson's heroine with 2 superpowered allies, Monica Rambeau, which was introduced in 2021 Disney Plus series WandaVision, and Iman Vellani's Kamala Khan, first seen in the 2022 series Miss Marvel. That's another problem too. It just seems like common sense decisions. It's a bad decision to have a movie with 3 leads in it, and 2 of them were introduced in 2 separate shows that a lot of people haven't seen. So people are going to be lost. They're going to be lost. So what they're going to do is they're probably going to have a lot of exposition dumps to explain who these people are, who these characters are, so general audiences can be caught up. But see, you didn't have to do that before. You didn't have to have these exposition dumps to explain who are these 2 other characters that are leading this film. WandaVision, Monica Rambeau was introduced back like 2 years ago. Do people remember her? But something else that's very telling. The writer of this article goes on to say that eyebrows were raised again when DaCosta, the director, began working on another film while The Marvels was still in post-production. The filmmaker moved to London earlier this year to begin prepping for her Tessa Thompson drama Hedda. So your director left the production during post to work on another film. A $250 million film. So this is what a source familiar with the production said. If you're directing a $250 million movie, it's kind of weird for the director to leave with a few months to go. Exactly. How unprofessional is that? I mean, this is another problem too, because recently, of late, people are being hired with no experience. These kinds of films. Nia DaCosta doesn't. J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay from Rings of Power didn't have a single writer or showrunner credit to their name before they took on one of the most famous and beloved IPs with Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. How are people being hired with no experience whatsoever? No experience in this kind of filmmaking and these big budget productions. But that's another part of the problem. Like, people are being hired, they don't know have a clue of what they're doing. And I'm sorry, that is extremely unprofessional for you to leave your project during post-production. A $250 million movie. Do you think Denis Villeneuve left to do another project? He didn't want to divert his attention to the Dune spin-off series because he was fully focused on the films, on the film adaptations. And after filming, was just engrossed in post-production that he wasn't doing that many interviews until he was mostly done. He wasn't even talking much about it. He was just so engrossed in post-production. That just astounds me. How can studios burn so much money only to not hire people that commit to the $1 million worth movie? That's something that this piece doesn't cover. It just makes assumptions. Oh, well, it's just too much content and other factors that they couldn't control. There were things that were well under their control. They could have a singular vision and they could hire competent people who love the source material, are well versed in the IP, and who were well qualified to handle a big budget production like this.